Commissioner Cheney.
Here.
Commissioner Castleline.
Here.
Commissioner Russo.
Here.
Commissioner Lava.
Here.
Judge Mills.
Here. Now declare a quorum, and because I can, I've decided to change things a little bit. Instead of going to public hearing first, we're going to go to items deliberation discussion and discuss and propose to Ransom County economic development policy, which includes guidelines and criteria to tax abatement and authorized by Chapter 312 of the Local Government Code, and guidelines and criteria of the tax rebate and agreements of other incentives as authorized by Chapter 381 of the tax code. And Mr. Meeks, if you would, let's discuss.
Thank you, Judge. And Colin, if you could bring up the slides. Thank you for setting this meeting tonight, and glad to be here.
Is the mic on so everybody can hear?
Hello, test. Yep.
I don't hear
Don't think so. Maybe the other one is a little,
These are on, but maybe it's not on at the
yeah,
at the
let
speaker
Colin work
level.
on it.
May I ask a question?
Certainly.
When Mr. Meek finishes his presentation, then will we be able to ask him
Yes.
questions? Thank you.
And the public as well, I assume.
We good, Colin? Oh, there.
Yeah.
Much better. All right. Thank you, Judge and Commissioners. Michael Meek, Meek and Associates. I'd like to give some information this evening on your items here, and I call it the first slide, another step, because this is just another step in the recovery from Harvey and working towards sustainability for your economy. We're basically here this evening because back in last December, the county asked the local government corporation to review and make some recommendations on changing to these policies which had expired. And so in February, the LGC in turn asked the Economic Development Corporation to look into this and make some presentations and come back, which they did in both April and this past October 1st. There was a president.
Interrupt just a second. Whenever you use an acronym, make sure that you identify what the acronym is first, and then you can use it then on.
Yes, sir.
It's just for a lot of people don't know what they are.
LGC, Local Government Corporation, EDC, Economic Development Corporation. Thank you, Commissioner. And so we did have a presentation to the Local Government Corporation back on October 1st, came to this room on October 7th and had a workshop on all this information back then. So why update these guidelines? Well, communities and counties do this because they want to see lower unemployment. They want to make sure they strengthen local existing businesses. They want to increase commercial tax revenues. Okay? And they also want to attract quality jobs. When I was brought on in early August of this year, on some very specific things the Economic Development Corporation wanted to see happen, I had the opportunity to go back and look at around a dozen previous studies that were done pre and post Harvey. There was one pre-Harvey on your airport master plan, the county airport, back in 2015, but all the other studies happened right after Harvey. These were done by some terrific organizations, and I believe at no charge to the city and the county. Texas A&M, the International Economic Development Council, IC Squared out of Austin, the University of Texas. Whitson and Faust did a long-term recovery economic development plan. The Pegasus Corporation out of Austin did a housing recovery plan. And of course, the Texas General Land Office with George P. Bush. All those organizations came in, had focus groups, many of them took input and gave their recommendations on how Rockport and Ransom County, Fulton could make their economy more sustainable. And so I've tried to put all those together. When you put all the documents together, it's about a foot or more high. I tried to consolidate all those ideas and strategies best I could. One thing came out of it was, and one of the things that the local government corporation asked the Economic Development Corporation to do is to, what industries or companies do we need here? What type of business sectors are we missing? Especially after Harvey, we saw that a lot of the eggs were in the natural resources tourism business. And when that goes away, which all weather dependent tourism businesses from time to time struggle, it left the community vulnerable. And so I took that into consideration as well. These top 10 that we came up with, I think you'll find to be very eco-friendly. You'll find them to be not what your neighbors by and large go after in nearby counties, but it fits Aransas County and it fits your communities here. These are alphabetical, not in any priority order, but aviation related is you've got a great airport. In fact, my father managed that airport for a short time when he lived here, and Judge Wendell appointed him as the airport county manager. That's a great facility. It's a great asset to the county and to the region. It's got a lot of potential for development. Medical, residents, or excuse me, I skipped one there, corporate and regional offices. With the expansion, explosion of teleworking and telecommuting in the COVID era, Aransas County is well situated to take advantage of work from home. We just need a little bit more broadband infrastructure to make that happen. Information technology as well. The need for broadband expansion is well documented. Private investment can be a partner in this and help taxpayers not bear the total brunt of this need. You may wonder why major tourism entertainment venues. Again, tourism has lots of pieces to it. You could have outside tourism dependent on weather and natural resources, but there are a lot of other kinds of tourism that's year-round that you could do as well with heritage and the arts and meetings and that nature. So there's a lot of upside opportunity here in Aransas County for that. Marine related, with your location right on the Gulf of Mexico and multiple bays, water related businesses producing products could thrive here and be of service to the many fishing guides and retailers specializing in this area. Medical is the next one. Residents are very much in need of more full service medical facility as well as additional elderly care and mental health facilities. Post-secondary education, you made a lot of progress with the Aransas County Workforce Development Center that's coming online hopefully next year. But you also, what that's going to do is that's going to become a magnet for companies wanting to be near where you are producing the employees of the future. So there's a lot of opportunities to bring companies in to tie in with that Workforce Development Center. R&D, it's a clean and high wage industry that could flourish here. You're close to environmental habitat, abundant sunshine most of the year, and a high quality of life. Retail and commercial business centers. When you look at the leakage studies that were done for y'all post-Harvey, you've got money being earned here that quickly leaves to go to other communities. And that's with things like automotive dealers, general merchandise, department stores, clothing stores, health and personal care products, electronics and appliances, and restaurants. So there's a lot of services that citizens need to purchase. If they were here, that money would be left here longer and can circulate here longer. And finally, attainable workforce housing. Of course, we all know about losing population after Harvey. Affordability is a major issue here and everywhere. And so continue to work on affordable housing at all income levels is really essential. So that's the 10. When you look at economic development overall, that basically, according to Ray Perryman, who's a noted economist, economic development in a nutshell is bringing in new dollars into your community. And there's basically 3 ways to do that. And Aransas County has two of them covered really well: transfer payments and the tourism. Transfer payments are, of course, Social Security, Medicare, annuities, retirees. Those are checks probably earned during somebody's career somewhere else that comes into Aransas County every day. And then those residents that receive those checks, they spend it here. So it's great to have a healthy retirement community. Tourism, of course, when you have people from San Antonio and Austin and Houston come visit, that's money they earned there, but they spend it here. What's really missing here is those primary employers. And again, a primary employer is one that produces a good or service here, but sells it outside of your trade area, but brings the money back into Aransas County. So that will be illustrated more here in a minute when you look at your residential versus your commercial tax base. There's several, though, when a company's looking to where to go, they don't go straight to what you can do for me as far as incentives. You've got to have some basics covered first. You've got to have that skilled workforce. You've got to have the quality infrastructure they need. You've got to be a place where people want to live. Once that's there, then the differentiators come in with their bottom line costs. And so incentives can and often play a role in securing that location. In fact, 94% of all Texas counties and cities use for some form of fashion of what we're talking about tonight with these policies and guidelines. Without them, you're really going to be handicapped to bring in new wealth, new commercial wealth into your community. The challenge here, and some communities don't do it well, is making sure those programs are effectively structured and reflective of your priorities, that you're in control of it, and in a manner that it maximizes your return on investment, not just the companies. That's the key, and that's where your legal staff has worked very hard on the documents that I submitted as a draft. And as you can see, they really beefed it up and made it your document. So basically, the things we're talking about tonight is in the code, the state code on chapter 312 and 381. It provides tax relief to residential taxpayers. That's something that's not talked about a lot. And the reason it is, so look at that bottom figure there. The state of Texas ratio of residential to non-residential tax base is a 40-60. In my home county of Comal County, it's 54-46, and we're considered heavy residential. In Aransas County, your ratio is 87-13. 87% of your tax base is coming from the rooftops, the residential property owner. That puts a great burden on them, and it puts governmental entities in a really tough spot to that's where the revenue can only come from when needed goods and services need to be increased. So during these meetings in October 1st and October 7th, we got a lot of good input, a lot of comments. I want to run through some of the things we heard, and then I'll be finished, Judge. But we heard that housing wasn't needed in the targeted business sectors, and it was noted that there are a lot of houses being permitted, a lot on the drawing boards, and that's true. But you have to look deeper as to what the price range of those homes are. And so a lot of them, I'd say most of them, are probably not going to be deemed as workforce affordable. So we feel like that needs to stay a targeted business sector. Some folks said that growth is already occurring, and that's true. When you look at sales tax revenues, they're up. But when you look at the ratios of your commercial tax base and the business sectors that you don't have, nothing's changed since Harvey, other than you've gotten back pretty close to pre-Harvey conditions. But the systemic issues that you had pre-Harvey are still there. The ratios are too heavy on the residential taxpayer on their shoulders. And that's what this is all about, trying to change that ratio a little bit. Some folks said we need an economic development analysis of these policies before adoptions, but let me say that these are only guidelines and criteria that your legal staff have put together. There's nothing to really analyze here. These guidelines provide the process for you to analyze a proposal And when you receive something, you want to be in the driver's seat. You don't want to be reacting, but you want to be driving the process. Lots of these ideas are old and not from local organizations. Well, in fact, the county was lucky to have Texas A&M Corpus, the International Economic Development Council, IC Squared, and more to give their vast advice at no charge. They did use a lot of focus groups and input. So that was great that you got that information. It really helped inform what you're being presented this evening. The coming Workforce Development Center doesn't make sense. All the local government entities supported the county's Workforce Development Center. It makes perfect sense for those desiring a better life. And I will tell you that hundreds upon hundreds of communities across this country have that as the centerpiece of their economic development strategy. Because in fact, the chamber here not the chamber, I shouldn't say that, Barbara, with your Economic Development Corporation, just completed a survey of about 44 businesses. The top rated need they had was skilled workforce. And right underneath that was listing difficulties besides finding that workforce was affordable housing. So that's right in line with what we're seeing happen across the country. No case studies were done on these policies. These policies relate to specific chapters in Texas state law. So there's really no study that you can do on a policy. Again, hundreds of Texas cities and counties use these incentives daily, and they do it. Most of them do it very successfully. Economic development is destructive to the natural environment. It doesn't work anywhere. Well, it works in a whole lot of places when 94% of the state in those cities and counties are using them. The targeted industries that we presented are very eco-friendly. They fit the Aransas County lifestyle and your brand. And so, and with these policies and guidelines, it gives you that control mechanism to fashion these to where it's a very winnable situation for the county. We don't want to be like New Braunfels and Comal County. I don't blame you. I don't want you to be like New Braunfels and Comal County either. Again, you have that unique brand and culture. That these suggested targeted business sectors and policies clearly reflect that. I was raised here, as you know, Judge, and I certainly don't want to do anything to hurt what I still tell people when they ask me, what's your hometown? And I say Rockport, Aransas County, Texas. So that's where my roots are. And when I retired from my 33-year career in New Braunfels, I felt like this was a way I could give back, because when Harvey happened, I was still there for a good 3 years. And every day I was not happy that I wasn't doing anything to help. And so this is a way that I think I could help. Incentives cost taxpayers. Well, not true if you set it up where it doesn't. There's a lot of ways that these can be done to where they're front loaded by the developer, they're collateralized, and the risk is very much minimized. Again, it's designed to put you in the control position and ensure that there's an acceptable rate of return for the county. No current values are involved, and additional county revenue is the result. The local government corporation and the economic development corporation are secretly forming new taxing districts. Not true. Especially in the case of the Economic Development Corporation, they're a nonprofit 501c6. They can't do this. Only the city and the county can do these policies and provide these things to companies. The policies recommended clearly outlines that the Commissioner's Court is solely in charge of these proposals. We should not fund businesses with bonds. I couldn't agree more. You aren't. Any bonds issued would be for public infrastructure, the way this is set up. In fact, had a nice talk with Commissioner Rousseau this week about that. There's ways to do these to where the developer pays all those costs up front and they're reimbursed from their success over time. So again, these funds go to public infrastructure, not to the business. Need to emphasize workforce housing more. I agree. It's one of the key targeted business sectors. It's certainly beneficial to helping recruit employees to remain or live in the area. Medical is doing well. You don't need to emphasize that sector. You are making a lot of great progress in that with that facility coming in, but there are many other pieces to healthcare that remain lacking here. And you have hundreds and hundreds of county residents each and every day leaving Aransas County for medical care, and those are dollars that are spent somewhere else. These policies won't help Commissioners Court provide additional services to constituents. If you have this new commercial tax base, you will be able to have additional funds to allocate to projects like drainage and street repair, law enforcement, and more. So that's the very reason you would do this. We are duplicating efforts by having incentives at the county. The Economic Development Corporation handles this already. Again, the Economic Development Corporation is a marketing and promotional organization. They have no authority to adopt incentive policies. This is a governmental function in the state of Texas. So gambling is planned for the Harborfront project, and TIFs will be used, TIF being a tax increment financing district. We are certainly unaware of any such initiative. Casinos are illegal in Texas. TIFs are a city tool for public infrastructure improvements that counties have the option to participate in, but we're not even talking about that tonight. Existing businesses are not qualified for incentives. In this policy, they certainly are. In fact, the county legal team drafted the policy that clearly states that existing businesses qualify. In fact, their level of participation is a lower bar to reach than a new business coming in. U.S. Supreme Court in South Dakota has ruled tax increment financing illegal. Well, not to our understanding from the U.S. Supreme Court, but I will say that the Texas Attorney General allows cities to utilize that particular mechanism for public infrastructure improvements. Counties can participate via interlocal agreements if the city should choose to do so, but the city would lead that process. And Judge, I'll just end by saying it's time to take that next step in the economic recovery of Aransas County, and be happy to answer any questions when it's appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Meek. Any questions from the Commissioners Court? Sure, we have one or two.
I have several. I'm not sure if Mr. Meek or Jen Austin will be the one who answers, or anyone who has that knowledge. And some of those concerns that were voiced with the responses up there were ones that I voiced, so I recognize them. And actually, I said North Dakota. I was incorrect in the information that I received. It did go to the North Dakota State Supreme Court, and then it went to the Supreme Court of the United States. It was remanded back to the North Dakota State, and the legislature, decided in their wisdom to outlaw TIFs. So they're no longer legal in the state of North Dakota. I don't know about South Dakota. All right. So beginning on page 4 of the document, I see that it's being proposed that the evaluation committee would have 7 members. I'm not sure where 7 came from. A lot of times when we're appointing a board or a commission, we usually have 5, it seems like. That way each commissioner and the county judge would be able to appoint one. So that would be my recommendation. On page 5, number 11, eligible reinvestment zone property. I wonder where these have been determined. Have they been determined? You're talking about eligible reinvestment zone property, and they would qualify. Have those zones been determined at this time?
No, that's on a case-by-case basis. Part of the process of doing a Chapter 312 would be to look at where the business wants to locate, and that zone would have to be created in order for you to continue on with that documentation, but that's on a case-by-case basis.
All right. Page 6, I would just say I am against options or section 24 and 25 tax increment funding, tax increment reinvestment zone. And I will note that Aransas County did defeat proposal 2. I know it passed statewide, but Aransas County voted to oppose the issuance of bonds.
Commissioner Russo, I just want to point out that that's the definition section. And we haven't actually done anything in the policy that states that the county would ever be participating in TIF or the TIRZ. It's just there for definitional
It
purposes.
just has to be in there?
Well, just so we're all aware that that is a definition you often see in economic development documentation. And so we're all on the same page with what they are.
All right, thank you. Then there are several other areas where they talk again about the investment zone or the enterprise zone. Page 7, so I won't refer to those, but on page 7, item number 2 at the bottom of the page, tax rebate agreements. The county could provide a grant or a loan of county funds or services. And I spoke last time when we had the workshop that I am against the county granting or loaning money. And again, on page 8 in the same section 2, it talks about cash grants. Under the PACE program, which is also on page 8, I did call the county auditor today and the tax assessor, and my understanding is currently we have one person participating in the PACE program, and that's Rockport Harvey Housing or Pearl Point, or however you want to define it. Okay, just for the record. I had a question on page 9, and Jen has since responded to that. Commissioner Laubach and I had concerns about the supermajority that was going to be required to amend or repeal the document, and she has clarified that there is no supermajority involved in any of this. It would all just be a simple majority. Isn't that correct? Okay.
And is it, I may still be looking at an old draft, and Jen and I did look at this right before the meeting. My draft here still says, unless amended or repealed as described in the tax code section 312002.
Right.
Say that, and the other page we looked at puts the language in there directly that says majority. If you look at that section of the tax code, it says majority.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, okay, we'll just double check after. I
double
looked it
checked.
up and I thought it said 4 out of 5.
I
but
did. I looked at it earlier today when Commissioner Russo and I were.
Definitely not 4 out of 5.
That's
Okay.
that's correct.
That's correct. All right, page 10, creation of new value, where you have the items. Do all of those need to be met or just a combination of one or more? I'm wondering.
The way it's worded, Commissioner, it's just that those are requirements the Commissioners Court may set for the business. It could be a combination of them all or one of them individually. However, the Commissioners Court chooses to proceed on that project.
All right, thank you. Page 11H, also under that section 7, where it talks about retail developments will be considered on an individual basis. I agree, we do need retail businesses here. And there were some questions the last time about rehabilitation or expansion of a business. My question, and I have no business interested in this. I know of no one interested. I just wanted a little clarification as an example. If someone wanted to come in and use the former Bell store, it's by the Sherwin-Williams, would they qualify? Or no, they would have to add on to that store for this to be considered?
Well, it would depend on their capital investment. I think the way the policy is written, but if, again, the existing value of that property cannot be abated. So it only would be anything new they bring to the table. So that would be a function of an analysis being done to see if it was beneficial to the county to do that.
Okay, so if someone wanted to come in and move a business into what is now a vacant building, this program would not be available to them unless there was a major investment or an expansion.
It depends on which program you're speaking to. I think that it'd be more likely that they would be applying for a 381 incentive of some kind. And it wouldn't necessarily be an abatement or a tax rebate. It could be a variety of things depending on what the Commissioners Court would be willing to look at. But certainly creation of new jobs is one of the things that this policy really does focus on. So creating new jobs in a currently vacant area would be something I'm sure you would look at a proposal for to see whether all the criteria and priorities are in line with what you're hoping to do.
Okay, thank you.
Pat, the 3/4 of the members of the governing body,
3:12:02. Do you want to return to that or let me to take up after you finish?
I'll let you
your
take.
comment? Okay.
On page 12, under K, maximum allowable tax abatement or rebate. I am curious, or I would like to propose, if this even goes through, that for the 9 to 10 years, we would give a 20% rebate rather than 30. We're dropping the others in 20% increments, and I would suggest we continue to do the same.
Yes, it says that the following is a sample.
Okay,
So yeah, exactly.
thank you for that clarification. Right under it, L, if Aransas County staff determines that the minimum requirements have been met, my question was, who is that staff? I think you cover that later, do you not? When you say it would be perhaps the commissioners and the selection committee?
Well, you've got part of the deliberation this evening is this committee that you recommend go from 7 to 5. But I would think there'd be a step process here to where the committee starts, or it comes to the judge, goes to staff, committee looks at it and makes a recommendation, staff works on it, brings it to the court.
Okay, I just was curious.
Multiple steps.
The staff would perhaps be the auditor's department or a combination of staff members?
That,
It could probably be whoever is set up for that because
yeah,
in some things, you may need somebody that's more mechanical than, you always need financial, but especially if you've got a implement company or something like that wanted to come in.
Right.
You'd need to, it behoove us to have somebody on that selection committee that would be into that, not just finance.
Right, but the selection committee may not be staff. So I'm just wondering if we're looking at adding another staff position. Okay, so page
Well,
15.
Before you leave that, let me add it says that the Aransas County staff determines the minimum requirements. That wouldn't be awarding anything. That's just they just said it meet the minimum specifications as set forth in this policy or anything else
Right.
that comes after that.
yes, sir.
So it's just an advisory. It looks at all the things like we do on selection of architects or selection of this or selection of that.
Exactly.
It goes to the staff looks at it, and we have outside influence if we need to, other people that are maybe if we're hunting insurance or we're doing this or that. We always have experts in the field to at least advise us.
Exactly.
So that's what that means is I
Yes,
read
sir.
it. Okay.
It's just another step.
Correct myself, and I apologize for interrupting the flow here. But with Commissioner Laubach, I did pull up the statute. I think I
It's
might have been
reporters.
burned by the resource I was using today and that it was revised in 2019. I do think it may be a 3/4 requirement. I will be leaving here tonight, double checking that and make sure that any language in the policy clearly reflects the current language. But I believe that may have been an error on my part for the resource I was using.
Well, my
Apologize.
concern here is, and a 3/4 vote of a 5-member body means you would always have to have 4 votes out
That
of
would
5.
be to repeal or amend the policy, yes. ma'am.
Right. And my concern is apparently the state says we don't have any discretion about that.
That's right.
And I have a concern about entering into a policy by a 3 out of 5 vote that we cannot get out of without a 4 out of 5 vote. I think that if the state ties our hands and requires a 4 out of 5 vote
To amend.
to amend or repeal within 2 years, then we should under no circumstances enter into it this year on anything less than a 4 out of 5 vote.
I understand your concern. And when I told you earlier that I double checked it, I had, but I hadn't used the official Texas website.
Yeah.
And that is my fault. And I'm going to admit publicly that I relied on a resource I should not have. And I apologize.
Okay, so we have a problem under state law that if we get into this thing, we can't get back out without a 4 out of 5 vote.
So
Regardless of what our policy says, that's
Right.
what the legislature tells us we're stuck with.
That's if you adopt this policy, you can't repeal the policy or amend the policy without a 3/4 vote.
Right. What I'm saying is if we adopt this policy, we're stuck.
With the policy, but you don't necessarily have to offer an incentive under the policy.
True.
But I think Commissioner Laubach and I both agree that if it's going to take a supermajority to get to amend or repeal, we would like for it to require a supermajority to accept the policy. That way it's consistent. Right, on page 20, under 8, public hearing. The last sentence there, the public hearing may be held at the same meeting that the agreement is presented for action. I think Commissioner Laubach and I have both stated several times that we would like to have an expanse of time, preferably 30 days, between when the hearing is and when we have an action vote.
And we're actually really talking about 2 30-day periods because there needs to be 30 days notice to the public before there's a public meeting so they can get ready. And I would like another cooling off period between the public meeting and any action meeting that we take.
And then again, on page 23, number 13, it was the public hearing. Again, stating that the public hearing may be held at the same meeting that the agreement is presented for action. Right. On page 24, where we're talking about the PACE program, number 2 shows qualified projects. And it defines the installation or modification of a permanent improvement fixed to privately owned commercial, industrial, or residential real properties with 5 or more units and intended to decrease energy usage of energy usage or water consumption or demand. Then in number 4, it says eligible properties. And there it more tightly limits to whom this program will occur. And I just wonder if they're qualified projects, why would they not be eligible properties? And that may be a function of the PACE program rather than the tax abatement. And I'm not saying you have an answer to that.
I
right
do
now.
actually have an answer.
Okay,
It's-
good.
It's related to definitions. Here, the eligible properties definition under paragraph 4 just describes the property itself, whereas paragraph 2 is the definition of a qualified project, which talks about what property the project would be located at, which is the same you see in paragraph 4, but when then adding a description of what the project would consist of. So it's essentially paragraph 4 plus something. I do note, though, that on paragraph 4, it says multifamily residential uses, and in paragraph 2, it says residential real properties with 5 or more. So perhaps it should clarify multifamily. But other than that, it's essentially paragraph 4 plus something, which is
All
the
right.
project description.
Thank you.
So the idea is before something can get into this program, it has to be a project of a sort and an improvement of a sort and property that it's sitting on of a sort, all 3 of which have to qualify or they don't get in. Okay.
And I know it was mentioned in another part, but towards the end on application for tax abatement and or rebate, page 32, they talk about when you submit the non-refundable application fee of $1,000 to make it out to Aransas County and submit it to the county judge. I was just curious because I think most of the time when money comes to the county, it either comes to the treasurer or to the auditor's office.
Definitely go to the treasurer's office immediately upon receipt. The idea was that most of these applications or proposals would likely be transmitted via mail, and that it would make more sense for the application plus the payment to go to one central location and then go to the appropriate departments. In this case, the the copies would be distributed to all the interested parties, being the commissioner's court, the committee, and maybe staff members who need to look at it. And then the funds would be sent to the treasurer's office for deposit.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost done. As Mr. Meek mentioned, I was able to meet with him via Zoom with John Jackson, Jatine Bakhta, and Mark Wagner. The other day, I had a friend come along with me who has worked for the Association of Counties and has many years of experience with them in auditing and accounting, and also worked for the Corps of Engineers in the Army. It was a great opportunity. They gave me good information. I still am concerned about this because while Mr. Meek mentions that our ratio, I think, is 87-13 or 84-16 residential to commercial, I think a lot of us who live in Rockport and Aransas County moved here because we had that kind of a ratio. And there is not a big attraction to me to change that to a 50-50 or 40-60, where the 40 is the residential. And that's one person, but I have talked to other constituents and I'm not alone in that. And I'm also concerned, and I did mention this at that meeting, that Schlitterbahn over in Nueces County was given quite a full package, tax abatements, incentives and such, and they're shut down now. And they explained that that had been front loaded. Is that correct? And if you are going to structure these, the best way to do it is back loaded. And I would say anything that we're going to do, if we do something, definitely needs to be backloaded so we don't end up in that same situation. But I thank you for taking the time and interest to meet with me and give me some more information.
I have some questions as well. That might be more characterized as comments. You mentioned earlier that the point of guidelines of this sort is that we, the commissioner's court or the county in general, are in control of decisions about who moves here and on what terms. I actually think that that's a basic mistake in the whole approach of an EDC. We're not, in fact, in control and shouldn't be. Businesses who invest their own money should be in control. Even further, they should be entirely they're the ones with money at risk, and they need to stay the ones with money at risk. They ought to be moving here because they've got a business plan that persuades them they can make a living here, that they have a deal with their customers. They and their customers are happy with it. It's not really up to the county government to decide if we're happy with it. They ought to be coming here on a basis that's self-sustaining and not on a basis that only makes economic sense to them if we're subsidizing them through tax revenues. Last thing we need is to bring businesses here who can only survive if they have a tax subsidy. We certainly don't want to see them moving here, taking a tax subsidy for a few years, and then turning out not to be sustainable at the end of their benefits. And then what are we left with? A giant empty building and a piece of property that's probably been overvalued because they had no incentive to contest the appraisals because they were getting a tax break. Meanwhile, their neighbors are getting the brunt of the comparables nearby. What we're doing is messing with price signals. Never a good idea in an economy, and it's why command and control economies aren't usually popular in red areas. This is still a pretty red county, and I don't really understand why the idea of central command and control's economy is so seeping so much into our local culture. So anyway, it just caught my eye when you said we're in control. We're not, and we shouldn't be. We can always, refuse to allow people to come here and do things we find illegal, but there ought to be an even playing field. Anybody knows what's legal and what's not legal here. And if it's legal, you ought to come here because you think you can make a go of it with your money and with your customers, not our permission and our largesse. On the question of the public hearing and the notice to the public, I brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and I don't see any changes yet in the draft policy. I think it is excellent to give the public 30 days advance notice of the holding of a public hearing, or at least, I may not be saying this right. Yes, 30 days notice of the fact that an application is occurring. It won't mean very much to the public if it's a bare notice. If it's something like you see on our agenda packet, notice there's a XYZ corporation and we're thinking about giving them a tax abatement, and that's all won't help you. And the last thing you need to do, have to do at that point, is come make a open records request request to us and wait and fight through the procedure. I know we're in a new era now, and it's much more cooperative to get documents out of the county, but we shouldn't be setting people up for that kind of problem. If we have somebody come to us with an application, that ought to be automatically available to the public with the notice. Now, I know there's going to be arguments that there are going to be things in the application that have to be kept secret. I can only say I've never been comfortable with the EDC structure, in large part because so much of it happens in private and behind the scenes, and we always seem to find out about it after they've worked on it for a year, and suddenly we have a product and we're asked to sign off on it at the last minute. I'm often reassured by the proponents that this is never going to be a problem, that the LGC is always going to be just as open and above board as possible, and there's no smoke-filled room aspect. And yet, it seems like every time a specific proposal comes up, I'm running up against the same problem of how do we get information out? Why do we have to fight to get the information? And why are we trying to approve policies that set up in the future a situation where people are not going to get the documents they need automatically? If the right to the documents is not automatic, as a practical matter, it's probably not going to happen. And I think it ought to be right here in the policy that the application has to be included with the notice. Now, if there really have to be things in the application that are truly trade secrets, I can imagine that coming up. I am very skeptical. My feeling is if you want a tax abatement, you ought to be willing to come clean with your information. You ought to be able to show us what your projections are about why you think you're going to be able to stay in business longer than the period during which we'll be handing out special favors. You made a statement about why we should do this because 94% of Texas counties and cities already do it. And I hear the argument that if businesses are trying to decide where to locate in Texas, that we could suffer a competitive disadvantage if other people have basically giveaway programs and we don't. I think for one thing, if all communities have them, everybody's just wasting money on taxes and all we're doing is contributing to that problem. It'd be better if everybody were alike and not giving it. I also would like to see this county distinguish itself among Texas communities as a place where you would want to bring your business here, not because you think you can get a special favor from the powers that be, but because it's a county where everything is above board. Nobody gets a special deal. You have an extremely predictable regulatory structure. You have an extremely predictable tax structure. The tax structure is very low, and it's not low for some people that we like and not so low for other people that we don't like. It's just low for everybody and predictable. That's the way you encourage businesses to come. The other way you can encourage them to come is not something that's entirely under our control, and that is things like the workforce. I mean, if we can do something to improve the workforce, fine, but tax abatements don't get us there. I would just like to see the community made attractive to business without handing out checks. There are other ways to do it. We talk a lot about workforce housing. We talked about it a lot after the hurricane as well. And I think we have a big NIMBY problem and a big inconsistency in our own minds. Inexpensive housing in this county arouses public ill will, especially if it's in the form of mobile homes or RVs. We never seem to quite work out in our own minds. Do we want a lot of RV parks and mobile home parks? Because that's the inexpensive housing. Or, subsidized apartment complexes. Until we decide that we don't mind having housing around that's not large mansions on the waterfront, we're not going to have affordable workforce housing. And I think subsidizing housing with tax money is a terrible idea. It just means you erase price signals and make it less likely that the projects are going to be maintained properly and fit in with what people want to see in their neighborhoods. That's pretty much it.
Well, I'll make a couple of comments. I never believe in supermajority. That lets that gets away from the majority vote wins. Okay, whether I'm for it or against it, there's been a couple of times whenever I voted with another commissioner against something and we lost, and so we just went on. So I'm definitely against that. I am in favor of a 30-day notice before a decision is made after the public hearing. And I think the public hearing needs to have, 14 days or whatever to give reasonable notice there. But, we can draw this thing out where it gets to be a real hot topic. And, just there's so many things go around that's just not true from all sides. I mean, it's not just one side or the other, but I think 30-day notice is ample. And the rest of the stuff, this is tax abatements work. I'm not in favor of doing away with taxes. That's not what I'm saying. But former judge of Pat County told me, Terry Simpson, he said, if I got a 10 or 15 or 100 acre plot of property that's making $2,400 a year in property taxes, and I've got a business that wants to come in and build a factory or something, and I'm just going to use, I don't know what their taxes are, but say the pipe plant in Sinton.
Mhm.
Okay. If they want to come in and start paying that off so that they go a number of years, 5 years, 10 years, no longer than 10 years, but more like 5 years if you can do it. But, the first tax day they do it, they don't pay any more than what was originally there. Okay. The next time they 20 or 30 or 40% or whatever, but that's 20 or 30% that we would not have had if they was still feeding cows. Okay. The question is, what do we want our children to do? My son is in the Navy because he couldn't find anything locally that fitted his interest. My daughter is a teacher in Kerrville. She couldn't find anything that met her needs for that because her husband was in a different industry that was not here. I've had grandkids and stuff that have come and gone and everything. So we need to diversify our economy. This place is not easy to live in if you don't make a lot of money. I don't make a lot of money and I support seven in my household. I can tell you, affordable housing, my house is paid for, but I've been here a long time. But affordable housing, I have many constituents in my precinct that would be living in affordable housing, that would have children and other people if there were opportunities here and jobs here and there was affordable housing. I had a constituent that lived out on Copano Ridge, and she was raising 3 children at the time, single, raising 3 children, and she had to move to Portland to get into a very nice subsidized housing unit over there. They've done very well over there, everything, but she couldn't live here because she couldn't afford it. And I think that's sad. I think that's an offshoot of the quality of life that we enjoy here. And I agree with Commissioner Russo and Commissioner Laubach in the fact that we don't want to be covered up with trailer parks or anything. But I'm over the south end of the county. I got trailer parks everywhere. And those people out there are the nicest people I've seen, and they either retired or work.
I was saying the opposite. I don't.
You don't live in my precinct.
I'm saying the opposite. I'm not trying to say I don't like trailer parks or RVs.
No, I'm sorry. I misstated that.
Okay.
You're right, Wendy. What I'm saying is that's low. Y'all said that's low affordable housing. Okay. And then it was made that there's places for that or not places for that. Well, in my precinct, that's the majority of the folks that live in my precinct that are in low to moderate income housing. I got some nice places. I got most of the frontage, the canal frontage. But we're not here for a particular group of people. We're here for the people that can afford to live here. And I think that the only way we're going to be able to continue to do that, if we had another Harvey this year or next year or within the next 5 years, I don't think we could have rebuilt because we spent so much money doing a very nice job of rebuilding. Somebody asked me in one of the places I spoke right after Harvey, said, how'd y'all do so well? I said, we had 40 years of planning. But what if we only had 3 or 5? I don't think we've done near as well. So I think this is a really good deal. I think we need to make sure that as many areas are covered as possible. But we need to look at the total community. And we need to figure out a way that we can reduce it. And, if I bring in, if the county brings in $10,000 additional dollars, okay, from a 20% rebate, but they're additional dollars, okay, then that offsets what we have to get from the only real source that we have, and that's rooftops. Then we can bring that in. And the good thing about property tax, if there is a good thing about property tax, is it's across the county. So if they do it in Rockport, we benefit. If we do it out in the county, we benefit. And if you'll look at our tax rate over the last several years, compare to the rest of the state, it's pretty good. And
Right.
we've I don't think we've been in a negative budget yet. I've been 13 years on the court and I haven't seen a negative budget yet.
I would
Jack,
like
hang on.
to
Let me just
correct.
respond to one thing that Jack said. I don't want to make sure I didn't express myself so badly that people got the impression I was saying the opposite of what I was saying. I'm saying in this county, affordable housing largely is RVs and mobile homes or something very close to them like modular housing. And that if we really want to increase workforce housing, affordable housing, one of the first things we need to do is quit being mean to people who want to have RVs and mobile home parks. We spend a lot of time regulating them and making them hard to making it very hard for people to have them. And I understand why we do that. Not everybody likes looking at them, but that's what we need to do if we want to really get serious about workforce housing, not kid ourselves into thinking that we can subsidize something that looks like an upper middle class house, but it'll be cheap because we've paid for it with taxes.
I would like to correct what Commissioner Cheney just said. I don't even think I talked about trailer parks or RV parks, but my neighborhood is between two. We have lagoons on one side and we have another one on North Live Oak. I have no problem with that. I was very excited when I heard about the new subdivision that was coming up, if you can call it that, of 1,100 manufactured homes. I don't know if that's in Bubba's district or mine.
It's in mine.
Okay.
Or if it's in that
But-
man's land.
I thought that was a great option because I know Lagoons has managed very well. And I just want to be sure that I am not being used in a way that I did not speak. I will own the things I say, but I will not own the things I did not say. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to say that Jennifer Holstein has spent several hours rewriting what Mike Meeks sent down here for us to look at as a draft. And I know Jennifer since she got here, and I believe wholeheartedly that she only thinks about what's best for Aransas County and what's good, what will work. And I can see some of the points that Commissioner Russo and Commissioner Dahlbach have brought up that need to be changed into 5.7. I can see that, and some others, but I don't personally see anything wrong with the document. And I appreciate the hard work from Ms. Olstein.
And I don't have a problem with anything any of the other commissioners have said, but I know all of my life, people have talked here about we need something to hold where kids can stay here and work and live here and not have to move off. And all really ever happened is was talked about. And that's something that we really need. I'm really not in favor of doing a lot of tax abatements or incentives or anything, but I feel like there are companies out there who would benefit us by being here. Like I say, I think we can hammer something out and ways to make it
I agree.
and
None of this is,
agreeable to everybody.
none of this is something that we're in charge of. This is something that future commissioners courts can make decisions on. And whether they like them or not, that's their decisions to make in the future. But it's just some incentives to at 87.13 percentage of 87% of the people that pay taxes are homeowners. I disagree. I don't think that's appropriate. I think if we had more businesses paying taxes, the tax burden for the rooftops would go down, in my opinion, but that's just my opinion. Anyway.
And yet we're thinking of offering tax abatements to businesses, not to homeowners. Did we, I think that some members of the public are here. Were we going to make some time for them to speak?
I was
This
just
is a
getting
public
ready
hearing.
to.
Okay.
All right. All right. We have,
Excuse me,
has-
Judge, could I say something?
yes, ma'am.
I have talked to Ms. Olstein about it, and I would like a little bit, when we get this document done, a clarification on what is actually being rebated or abated. Right now, it's the whole tax rate. We have the way that we do our taxes, we calculate a debt service rate and an M&O rate.
Right.
And I mean, right now it's not an issue, but if we got some kind of big industry or something in here, it could really affect our debt rates. So I would like a little bit of clarification on that in the document when we get to it. And also whether it's going to be just for the general fund or for the road and bridge special tax too.
I think some of our bond issues say that, for infrastructure is that part of the INS on it, the debt and stuff. I don't think we really can debate that. I think we're only talking about M&O, maintenance and operation.
But the way the document is, that doesn't clarify it. I would like to see something in there. And I have talked to Jennifer about that, but I just wanted to
That's a good point.
let y'all know.
All right, we do have some people that have signed up to speak. Melissa Esquivel.
See if I can get this right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for letting me
State
come up.
your name and
I
address,
hate
please.
to interrupt, but do you want to go ahead and open the public hearing portion and then let Ms. Esquivel speak?
That's a good idea. Why don't I do that? I'm opening the public hearing now, Ms. Esquivel. Please speak up.
Thank you so much. I'm Melissa Esquivel and I live at 2451 Murphy Road. And I am a resident of Aransas County, have been for about 25 years and a homeowner for about 15. And I got to tell you, this is like a really intriguing topic. There's been a lot of good discussion happening here, and I appreciate that. And Ms. Osteen, I've read through your packets you put together, and you put a lot of time, a lot of thought into it, and I greatly appreciate that as well. Couple of things. I was watching the presentation by Mr. Meeks. Is that correct? Yes, thank you so much for that. There was a few things that I seen in there in regards to incentives and abatements that it looks very appealing. However, I kind of went down the rabbit hole on this for the last month because if I want to know if this is something that's going to work, we need to do it. Okay. But unfortunately, in a lot of the research that I did, and I didn't go left or right or this way or that way, I went right down the middle, university studies and economic development, because I really wanted to get down to the meat and bones of it. One of the things that I noticed is that there is a lot of missing information there. And it's even something that's been acknowledged by the state comptroller's office in regards to reporting on the outcomes of these incentive programs that are being given by local governments throughout the state. And it was a little bit discouraging because I was hoping to find something good there. But what I did find throughout all the research studies that had been done was that a common statement was made was we don't have enough information here to conclude if these type of incentive programs actually do help. Okay, and I found that to be very interesting. One of the things that's been done, I think it was implemented back in 2016, is the GASB 77, where the local governments are to report their tax incentives, their tax incentive programs, but only certain ones. And that information is very limited as to what's reported to the state. It's typically what the program is, what the incentive is that's being offered, who it's being offered to. But I find it interesting that for programs that have been implemented for 30 to 50 years and highly utilized throughout the state, that we really have no outcome that's reported. You hear a lot about what it will do, but I'm not finding any statistical data to support that. And I do think that needs to be a concern to the public, because how can we invest that kind of money into a program without knowing what the outcome is? So that's one thing there. The other thing that I found out, and I really want you to pay attention to this because I think this is important. And I'm still not completely 100% opposed to tax incentives or abatements. I want to make that clear. But very close to home to us, there's been issues in neighboring cities and counties, San Patricio being one of them. And what you see is the wind turbine farms. Okay, this is just one example. They were given tax abatements, big tax abatements, and they go for 10 years. And what has ended up happening is that in your first 5 years of these programs is when your highest appraisal happens because of the development and the building and the equipment's brand new. Okay. And then after that 5 years, that appraisal value tends to depreciate, or the value tends to depreciate. Well, when that 10 years is up, a lot of companies, either one, especially in manufacturing, the first 8 to 10 years, they collapse, they move on. Okay, they don't live past that 10 years. And with the wind turbines, they turned around after the 10 years and said, our equipment is used up. It needs to be changed out. We need to upgrade it. So what they would do is they go to the appraisal district and they file to have their tax appraisals reduced. And when they're not reduced, they have lawyers and they sue. And they have those appraisals reduced to a very minimal amount. In some cases, as low as 20% is what their baseline tax amount was. So that's a big concern when we start giving these 10-year tax abatements. And so I think we really need to probably consider that. I would even go as far as recommending that on these tax abatements, if you do decide to do those, that we possibly keep them down to a maximum time of 5 years, because that's where they're going to get abated. And then we keep that percentage lower, say 50%, so that we still get some money back, some return that will offset the influx of tourists or people that come into the community. And it will help offset the burden on the infrastructure with the road wear and tear, public services.
Limited this to 5 minutes. I'm just giving, you got your own.
I'm done?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Nancy Bolton.
Good evening. Nancy Bolting. I live at 201 Spanish Woods Drive in Rockport, Texas. And I serve on the EDC committee for the city of Rockport. I do want to bring up a couple of things. We've had the Workforce Training Center that we spoke in front of the county commissioners trying to get here because there were some residents that were against it, stating that it was going to raise our property taxes. And I quote, "To keep the endeavor operating, citizens of Aransas County would have to be included in the Del Mar Junior College taxing district at about 28 cents per $100 valuation on their property taxes." Well, we've been assured that we're not in their taxing district. And we just had a nice opening for that and a nice tour of our Workforce Development Center. And it has been embraced by our new superintendent and multiple people within our community. And the people that were unaware of what was happening with Little Bay that now know what's going on are excited. So we have citizens that are excited about this that don't keep up with a lot of the things that go on within our county or our city. I also have another quote from something that was also stated from citizens that seem to be against these tax abatements, against anything that's going to show us any growth. But what I don't ever hear is what they are for. And I'm for the tax abatement. I just got through listening to Ms. Escobar because she was talking about the positives. She hadn't been able to find any positives. I'm from Calhoun County. And when DuPont was Carbide, came in, they assisted our schools. They took property, they got tax abatements. Formosa, which isn't, in my aspect, it's not the best place, the most safest place, but they had done a lot for the county. That's not what we want here because we want to keep our bays and our environment safe. But I do think that tax abatements will help us. And it was a long discussion after the hurricane that the only thing we relied on was tourism. I have recently closed one of my businesses, primarily because my rent went up, because our appraisals went up. We have people that can't afford to live here, and we all know that. We all know that. But I'm going to also quote something else that was in here. It says, "We the people need to continually remind our elected officials that they work for us." Y'all do work for us. There's only 4 of you and an elected county judge. We take our whole county, we divide up into 4 pieces. Y'all have a lot on your plate to decide for us, but you do work for us. I'm also going to continue this with, while these officials represent us, we should not allow them to act with impunity. We, the people, elect our officials to make the best decisions, but we need to be vigilant in their actions, and the information, discussions, votes, etc., coming before them. You hear a lot from people that are negative against everything that y'all do. I want you to know that there's a lot of us that are very positive and want to see positive growth in our community and offset some of these property taxes that we were told we were probably going to have if we had a workforce development center. Same thing with our hospital. I'm going to leave this as for something for you to ponder on as well. Another quote, how much longer do we have to listen to people who think they are qualified to make decisions on our behalf, but want, need, or desire no input from the people who put them in office? We've given a lot of input. We've been in lots of open meetings. We've had lots of discussions. We keep having workshop after workshop after workshop, and it just keeps going on and on and on. From 2018, we have a list of things and wants that we wanted to do. I'm going to finish this quote. These same people want us to be involved in the process, but then we get told that we are too late. We are unqualified. We are rabble rousers, 5%ers, rogue Republicans, among the negative terms. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. But I also believe that what you are proposing here and the fact that our county commissioners, nothing in this policy shall imply or suggest that the Aransas County is under any legal or equitable obligation to provide any incentive whatsoever to an applicant. I disagree that there should only be 5 members on that committee. I think there should be 7, mainly because sitting before me, we obviously have 2 commissioners who are against it. We have 2 that seem to be very favorable, and that leaves the judge to make the deciding factor. With 7 people, we have a little bit more wiggle room, a little bit more discussion, because you seem to be very hard set in your decisions based off of people that have made a lot of comments against anything positive in our community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Kathy Jackson, or Katie Jackson, I'm sorry.
Katie Jackson, 2205 Monkey Road. I'm going to say I'm ambivalent about these policies because I really, at this point, don't know what to think anymore. I do know that government, whichever government, should not be picking winners and losers. That's not the job of government. As Commissioner Laubach was saying earlier, market forces should govern that. But we may get lucky and we may have the right corporation entity come in with the right thing that's the right fit for the right place, and all the ducks fall in a row. So there's a whole lot of things to consider in all of this. Now, this being a set of guidelines and criteria is, that's all it is. As Mr. Meek said, that's all it is. It's guidelines and criteria. I've done a deep dive in all 3 of the tax codes. I need some sleep now, but there's a whole lot of leeway. There's a whole lot of subject to interpretation. So careful steps forward may be best. When it comes to tax abatements, we really have to think about what we get back for what we give. Where's the return on investment? Where's the incentives? When the Chapter 311 gets brought into all of this, that makes it worse because there's all kinds of issues that come with the 311. So I suggest extreme caution moving forward. As to the committee, it doesn't matter how many people are on the committee. It really doesn't. Once we get into other parts of all of this, we're going to have committees that can be up to 15 people. So minimum of 5, maximum 7. I almost don't, it really doesn't matter. They can approve anything they want to. You 5 have the decision. They don't approve anything. They recommend, and that decision stays here. So the composition of that committee plus you is what makes all of that happen, whether it happens or not. Once again, going back, as Mr. Meek has said, and several people have already said, you guys can go through this and never, ever do a tax abatement. It's your choice with the correct information and, on and on and on and on.
So what we're trusting you to do is to make the right choice with the information available. And that's all we have. That's all we can do. Rely on y'all to do the right thing, no matter if we pass this or not. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Jennifer Shaw. I need help with the microphone for her.
Jennifer Shaw, 442 Augusta Drive, Rockport. I want to start by a comment, and it's not intended to be smarmy or condescending. I've been a real estate lawyer for 43 years. I graduated from Georgetown University Law Center with a major in real estate. I taught as an instructor, which is the lowest level of teacher, land use at Georgetown for a year. Then for the next 25 years, I was a lawyer with some of the largest real estate finance, real estate developer, and then real estate lender law firms in the city of Los Angeles. I ended up my career in a train crash, which paralyzed me. So I was not about to be working full time. But what I was doing at the time of the train crash was I was doing workouts of screwed up gigantic real estate projects. Once I recovered, I didn't come to Jesus. I came to toxic substances affecting neighborhoods, which is probably, thankfully, not an issue we have to deal with here. But I've been working at that now for 18 years. So all of this discussion is old news to me. I did my first TIF deal by myself in 1981. It was the Sheraton Hotel on Figueroa Street in downtown Los Angeles. I represented Sheraton Prudential, and their tax abatement expired last year. The hotel was a $35 million hotel when it was built. The last time I saw something about it being sold, for about the 8th or 10th time, it was sold for something like $500 million. The city of LA, up until this year, did not collect a dime in real estate taxes. They got hotel tax, but it was, in my view, a stupid deal when the city made it, and it was a stupid deal 40 years later when it expired. So I'm happy to hear a discussion of short term. That's a business key. You don't want to let the tax abatement ride because the property owners monetize it. Suddenly, if you can sell a building and say, and you don't have to pay real estate taxes, the price of that building goes up and goes in somebody's pocket, and you don't get anything for it. And that really offends me. The other point to make is that you need to word your documents, and you need to think about it so that the abatement ends if the property is sold, or if the majority or substantial ownership interest in the building is sold by way of a sale of an LLC membership or a partnership interest. Because nobody will give a hoot about Rockport once that agreement is signed. Nobody in the real estate universe of everywhere between here, Europe, and Japan, and many points in between. Those are some key points that I hope will be kept in mind. The other point that I want to make is something that was taught to me by an MBA from Wharton Business School when I was about 19 years old. I was working for him. He was developing low and moderate income housing. And in fact, he still is. He said to me, don't ever agree to a deal that you don't understand. And that's critical for your first votes on this. And it's critical for the people you have administering this program for you. If you don't understand the documents, don't agree to them. If you don't understand the math, don't go for it, because somebody earlier mentioned courts and going to court and litigating. I guarantee you judges do not understand any of this stuff. And so if you get
So I
yourself
hate to be the bearer of
into
bad
trouble,
news. Your 5 minutes is
you
up.
may lose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We need a buzzer instead of me being the bad news person.
Just learn how to make a buzzing sound.
All right, John Jackson. Okay. Nancy Cuskin. Oh. Christy Rutledge. That's the one that.
Thank you, Judge, Commissioners. I'm glad to hear that some legal experts have talked, Ms. Shaw and Jennifer, Ms. Esquivel, she got into the details, so did Ms. Katie Jackson. I want to talk in generalities, and I think Melissa Esquivel alluded to this, that there's a lot of reports up here, a lot of reasons that are given towards possibly needing these or wanting these. And there were studies done starting after Hurricane Harvey, the ICT study. I think everyone needs to go onto the Chamber of Commerce website and understand the purpose behind the economic development policy starts there. As far as attracting businesses, they're looking to attract talent, not Rockport talent, but talent from outside of the area. It's an experiment with the University of Texas that's only been done with Sweden and a region of cities in Sweden. So the idea is to create a regional economy with corporate offices here in Rockport and to incubate our economy. So everyone kind of needs to understand where we're headed here before we understand what all these legal things are, because there's a lot, 46 pages. I'm not an attorney. How's it going to work out? 7 people on a committee. Who's going to be on the committee? Right now, we do have an economic development corporation. They were assigned to write these policies, which I find kind of awkward that a group of investors and builders and people with vested interest in tax abatements would be assigned by the local government corporation to write their own policies for people that possibly within the organizations that are going to benefit from this. We do have a couple of tax abatements within the city and in the county. One is for the Rockport Harvey Housing and one is for Ace Hardware. Who's administering these? Commissioner Rousseau alluded to that. Is this another employee? Is it 2 employees? Is it 3 employees? Is it multiple departments? I've seen kind of some internal emails through public information requests, and I can tell you that they're late on their reports and nobody's studying their reports. And we're not really quite sure if we do have a return on investment. I do know that there's a housing report that's done, and there's a lot of information that's gathered based on subsidized housing and affordable housing and workforce housing, whatever that is. And all of the heavily subsidized housing that we've had since Hurricane Harvey, the rent has gone up. So do we have a return of investment on that? We need to know that because what we are doing here is we're abating properties for a purpose, but the current residents, the 87% of taxpayers are paying for the infrastructure to build those properties. So I think it's important to kind of look at what's the purpose, who's behind it, and what is our return on investment? 30 days, if y'all are going to have this policy, 30 days is a minimum, and we need to have full disclosure. I've looked at all of the economic development master plan, comprehensive plan. Have the commissioners seen that? Because the idea of a tax increment finance has to do with developing the harbor front. And that is an objective. And I will say that a tax increment finance zone was proposed by the county in an election in May of 2010 to build a conference center that the Chamber of Commerce would manage, but it would be owned by, on the harbor front, it would be owned by the county. The voters rejected that. And just this last week, we also rejected Proposition 2 here in Aransas County, which is a tax increment finance for counties by 54%. A year ago, we rejected the county courthouse because the majority of voters in Aransas County do not want to fund for the overdevelopment of downtown. I want to speak about tax increment finance. That would capture the taxes in that zone and take it away from the school systems. The state of California has the one that started tax increment finance. They did a lot of them and they outlawed it because it was taking money away from the school system. It was taking money away from the infrastructure that was needed and only putting it into redeveloping blighted areas.
Thank you, Ms. Rutledge.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Shanna Rader.
Ms. Rutledge, what was your address? 1411
Dana Drive.
Dana.
Hello, I'm Shauna Brader. It's Shauna. 703 South Vern Street. I don't have a whole lot to add. I did want to talk a little bit about what Ms. Laubach said about they are coming here and they are doing this and that. I am on a very small scale doing a development here. I know Commissioner Casterline and I talked about it the other day. You drove by my property for me so we could talk about some things that going on over there. I've been a resident off and on of Aransas County for 31 years. So it sounded like Ms. Laubach, Commissioner Laubach was talking about kind of Big Brother coming in. And to me, I sit among at least 6 business owners here. So there are many of us who are interested in the infrastructure and the growth and those things in Aransas County. And it's not just people that are coming here wanting to do things in our county. It's people that are already here and entrenched here. And I am one of those people, and I am in support of the EDC and the abatements and those things. And so I just wanted to voice my opinion about that. I don't have a whole lot to add, except that I have reviewed some of the documents and I'm in support of it. So thank you very much.
Shana, can I just say, if I talked about people, sorry, Shauna, if I talked about people coming here, I think I was referring to businesses coming here, and I want businesses to come here. I realize this also can be, redevelopment from within the community, but I didn't mean to suggest that there was any kind of Big Brother aspect. I want us to be very attractive to new business.
Yeah. And it just seems to me like it's not always just Big Brother kind of breathing down our throats. It's some of us small guys here that are already wanting, that are already here, that are wanting to do development also. And so the abatements would benefit us too if we were, selected. One last thing, since I do still have time, adopting this would do absolutely nothing. It's going forward and what happens then and what you guys would remain in complete control. So just the adoption of it would just allow us some leverage, allow you guys some leverage. And then going forward, you guys would have complete control over who you offer the abatements to. So.
As she said that, and I totally agree. It wouldn't be just this commissioner's court, it'd be commissioner court in the future. They would have the control of doing whatever would be right at that time. Nothing's cast in stone here. All right, public hearing on proposed creation of Aransas County Economic Development Evaluation Committee. Do we have any discussion on that?
I mean, that's
We're going back to the items for deliberation discussion. proposed creation of Aransas County Economic Development Evaluation Committee and appointment of initial committee members. I don't know that we were at that point at this time.
I don't think so, but
I don't
I
either.
mean, I see that committee as a review committee to, when somebody applies, to consider it, to bring it forward to us, you know, and I would think, back to some of the other comments, I mean, we might want somebody from Road and Bridge on it. We might want somebody from environmental at times, the auditor's office, treasurers, and
So, Stan, you have a suggestion, or Mike? On this
Committee, the composition of the committee, there's a lot of leeway right now. There's no guidelines really in the policy about who you might choose. But that is something that some of us have talked about a little bit. And normally what you'd like to see is people who are knowledgeable in certain areas of development that could carefully look at these proposals and give you valuable advice on whether it should be something we look at or not. So maybe somebody who can look at it from a bank's perspective. Is this the kind of business plan that we would look at and want to loan someone money for?
So
Because
we're-
that's essentially what you would be doing, is looking at that same project and saying, does this have merit? Do they have the financial stability to actually go through with this project, complete it, and be successful? So having people on the committee that come from different backgrounds, different areas of business, and maybe at different parts of their career, I would look for people outside of the county and business people within town and maybe in the surrounding area within Aransas County, and look for people that could bring valuable perspective to your committee.
And I would like to see each commissioner be given an opportunity to nominate someone. So it would be structured sort of the way I think your draft tree ordinance reads. Because otherwise they'll all sort of be decided by, another group somewhere, and then it will land in our laps in a meeting. It would be nice if each of the 5 commissioners brought something to that table.
And I'll withdraw my opposition to having 7 or more, with the idea that each commissioner and the judge would have the opportunity to appoint one person, and then we could make it up with others as the need arises and as that particular application maybe would require.
Yeah, to have the commissioners select individuals, and then have, if they were coming in with a particular type of business, having somebody that was in that business or not related to that particular business, be able to come in and give some insights into issues and opportunities and problems.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Commissioner, and thank you, Commissioner Russo. That's what you and Commissioner Laubach are bringing up on the committee composition, is what's most commonly done for a committee like this. Let me also just say, in general, in my 33 years in New Braunfels working on these, we probably had 1 a year average get through the process to the finish line. And 2/3 of them were public infrastructure based or quality of life based. Maybe 30 in 33 years were to companies. So that gives you kind of a big picture view of, in America's fastest growing city, top 3, that these are not going to be very often. You want them to be, but in reality, these are going to be few and far between. Takes a lot of effort on the part of Economic Development Corporation and the marketing they're going to be doing. And then the vetting process is grueling. There are a lot of vetting. And so I think there's going to be lots of opportunity for oversight and getting to the finish line. If they get to the finish line, of every 50 companies or businesses that open, you may have 1 that would qualify and get through the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have, am I correct in saying the only one the county has ever done is Pearl Point? I think I've been told that that's so. And the only other 2 I know that are outstanding are ACE and Pearl Point. ACE was the city, not us. I wasn't on the commissioner's court when the Pearl Point tax abatement was given. And I don't really recall whether the public was involved in any way. Was there a public hearing? Was there? I think that I was paying pretty close attention at the time, although I wasn't yet on the court. I don't remember. All I know is it sort of happened suddenly.
Commissioner, the statute does require that it would have been a 30-day notice period prior to the agreement being approved, and it was required in the statute back then.
But not necessarily a public hearing. And I don't think there was a lot of public input. That's all I'm saying. I would like to see that change in the future.
Okay, we have to discuss the proposed application forms that we have here in the resolution 27/2021.
Well, excuse me. The comment that I had on the application form, which I mentioned about the county judge, and I think Ms. Austin said that it would then come into the county judge's office, and then the check would be forwarded either to the auditor or the treasurer's office. And then I had a question on page 33, under the economic development section, where it shows workforce housing 50+ units. I'm very leery anymore of the term workforce housing, because I was under the opinion or under the impression that Pearl Point was going to be for workforce housing or affordable housing, and perhaps it is, but I think it's not apples to apples. So I'm wondering if there is some way to indicate that rent rates could be considered, because what we saw with the Saltgrass Landing apartments, those are just fabulous apartments, facilities, and yet they are definitely affordable housing in a way that Pearl Point is not.
If I remember correctly, whenever we were talking about Pearl Point, they made a very specific comment that they were not subsidized or low-cost housing.
Well, they talked about it in the beginning, but then they went away from it.
Yeah.
Right.
It wasn't in the final plan.
No. And we had several meetings on that. Matter of fact, we passed over it a couple of times before. I think we made the decision on it, if I remember correctly.
But if there is some way under the workforce housing 50+ units to determine if the rent rates would be within a lower income level.
Commissioner, the way this reads right now, it's not defined by that way, but that doesn't mean that the Commissioners Court could not consider that at the time that a project application is received. And I would be hesitant to put hard guidelines in here regarding what the rent levels would be, or looking at the poverty level at the time the contract comes forward.
Right.
I think it would be better that the Commissioners Court in these seats, when the project is up for review, look at that time at whether a rent control provision might be advisable to put in an agreement. There is leeway in here in the way that the contract terms are laid out in the policy, were you to add additional terms to a contract, the Commissioners Court would require in an agreement in order for a deal to go through. So I think that's a really good point, and that depending on what the project is, that might be something that the Commissioners Court at that time would want to build into the project plan.
Okay,
Jen,
Jen.
I hear you, but if workforce housing doesn't mean affordable or below market or something rather like that, then all it really means is housing. And it just basically means we're opening the door to tax abatements to anything that's intended to be rented to people to live in.
I don't think it would be a bad idea to put something in there that's below market or some kind of term, but I would be hesitant to put something in there that is a percentage or a dollar level.
I wouldn't want to do that either.
Below market cost housing.
We can easily add that if the Commissioners Court desired.
Okay, getting back to resolution number 27/2021. It's a resolution adopting the economic development policy, which includes guidelines and criteria for tax abatement and authorized by Chapter 3312 of the Local Government Code, and guidelines and criteria for tax rebate agreements and other incentives as authorized in Chapter 381 of the Tax Code, creating the Ransom County Economic Development Evaluation Committee and appointing initial committee members, adopting application forms, and providing for repealer and savings of effective date.
Can I ask I know it's traditional in forms of resolution, have a lot of whereas clauses, and it is extremely traditional to add that, whereas the following policies are a great idea, and whereas we believe the economy works a certain way and so forth. It would be so helpful to me not to be asked to sign a resolution that includes a number of statements about how the economy works that I think are simply not true and that aren't necessary to approve the document. I mean, if it's something statutory where you're not allowed to approve it unless there's sort of a list of required whereas clauses, I understand. But if there's not, I really wish that the resolution didn't have to be so argumentative on an issue of such hot dispute in economic theory.
Judge, I'll just add that language comes from the legislature over a period of many, many years. So, economic development is a public purpose as defined in state statute. So that's where all this emanated from. So you could have any parts of that in your resolution that you want, but these are all statements made by state government. And then that trickles down to cities and counties that allow them to do these particular chapter 311, 312, 380, 381.
But they're optional. I mean, it's not as though the resolution won't have legal effect if we.
Oh, yes. All these resolutions look differently from county to county. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, the other way to put it is whereas the majority of the commissioners or something, but I just don't put individual commissioners who don't believe a word of it to the task of signing it and making it sound like they're buying off on the argument.
Well, I have under the resolution, since they're not numbered, but the last one on the first page where it shows resolution number R27, 2021, section, whereas the Commissioners Court may develop and administer a program under 381.004H of the Local Government Code for making loans and grants of public money and providing personnel and services of the county. I would really like to see that struck.
Directly from the statute for 381. And the reason why I put it in there is because even if you choose not to do that, it is something that you're allowed to do by statute. It doesn't mean that you will. It just means it's options that are available to the Commissioner's Court. Most of the time when you're talking about 381, you're talking about tax rebates. You're not usually talking about these other types of programs. But just to be clear, there is language in this section of the statute in 381 that even says you can use county resources, including county labor, which I know you likely would not do. So the idea is just to have the recitals in there to refer people back to the statute to see where the authority comes from and what types of programs you could choose to offer if you deemed it wise to do so at that time. You'll note, though, that the policy doesn't actually include anything about making grants or loans of money. It's really about rebates.
It did have that, though.
It says that it's available under the statute. Yes, ma'am. But we could remove it if the Commissioner's Court desires.
All right, this needs to be a motion made.
Not on the.
Not-
It's not on the agenda. Well, yeah, it is. Okay, never mind.
Right. I mean, this is just a public hearing. It'll be some weeks before we actually have a meeting to adopt these policies, right? And they're going to get another draft. And
We're
so
actually at a special meeting, but it's not
It's not-
agenda to do
it's not
anything
an
but
agenda to do
discuss.
it.
not an action item today, in other words,
Right.
just a discussion item.
So is there any other things we need to discuss at this time? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank
you all
you.
for
Thank you for coming. And this will continue in the future.